What's up guys, back with another Borderlands video, and today I'd like to talk about a variety of different things. As you can see from this video's title, today marks the 5th anniversary of Borderlands 2's release, so we'll be talking a little bit about that, and we will also talk about some statements from Randy Pitchford as they pertain to Borderlands 3. But I guess without further ado, let's just go ahead and start. So it's pretty crazy that Borderlands 2 is now officially 5 years old. And while I didn't pick up the game at launch, I did pick the game up in about December 2012, and I've pretty much been playing it ever since. However, what amazes me is how much staying power this game has had over these past 5 years, and as of the time of making this particular video, Borderlands 2, a 5-year-old game, has about 10,000 people playing it on Steam. To put this in perspective, Borderlands 2 has almost as many concurrent players as Dark Souls 3 does, and has more concurrent players than both Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2 combined. And you've got to admit that on some level, this is really impressive considering that Borderlands 2 is only a year younger than Dark Souls 1 and is actually 2 years older than Dark Souls 2. Now, you may also be surprised to know that Borderlands 2 has more concurrent players than a fair amount of other relatively newer games like Doom 2016, Titanfall 2, and Prey. And while I suppose there are quite a few newer games on Steam that exceed Borderlands 2's player numbers, again, you've got to admit that Borderlands 2 is maintaining player numbers on par with games that were released within the last 2 years, which is extremely impressive. One thing that's for sure is that Borderlands 2 has fared a lot better than Borderlands the pre-sequel, which seems to hover around 1,000 to 2,000 players per day. At the same time, the realization that Borderlands 2 is now 5 years old does make me feel kind of old, and it also really doesn't feel like it was that long ago. Though I guess when you sort of think about it, with like release dates of DLC and extra patches for the game, the last DLC came out in April 2014, which was only really about 3 years ago, and the last major patch for the game came out in October of 2015, and we're heading up to the 2-year anniversary of that. So those dates were definitely not that long ago. In a lot of ways, I'm really glad that I got to pick up the game closer to its initial release date and experience it throughout the years. I really remember being hyped and extremely excited for each new DLC release for Borderlands 2, and speaking of that, I remember when everyone absolutely flipped out when one of the Gearbox employees screwed up and took a picture of himself in front of a logo for Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, and the internet at the time was clamoring to know what the final DLC for Borderlands 2 was going to be, and I've got to say that while Dragon Keep isn't my favorite of the campaign DLCs, it's definitely one of the best. I also remember the craziness that was Black Rarity modded weapons and gear, and there was a lot of really crazy creations that people put together, and I guess as a few examples, there were class mods for Axton and Maya that would boost either Grit or Fleet by like 20 skill points. So what would happen is you could effectively make Axton immortal, and you could make Maya run so fast that she would traverse the map in like 10 seconds, and it was pretty awesome. There were also these crazy jump guns that people put together that had infinite ammo, and you could use them to propel yourself way up into the air. Now, as you might expect, these would shoot like bada boom projectiles, and unlike the legit method where you dual wield bada booms and then you time your grenade throws as Salvador, this method and having a jump gun like this would allow you to just get blasted up into the air with minimal effort on your part, and it was pretty awesome. And it was also sad when Gearbox ended up patching it out, because a lot of people really like to create their own modded weapons and share them online. And while I do sort of get why they did it, And it did definitely present some problems, as some people don't want to play Borderlands with mods. It really sucked at the time because a lot of people played the game to experience and mess around with some of those weapons. However, thankfully, thanks to the efforts of guys like Shadow Evil and the guys over on the Community Patch GitHub page, we can make our own gun and weapon mods on the PC version and actually make them look way better than the old Black Rarity weapons ever did. Ultimately, though, it's really been a heck of a ride these past 5 years, and I'm craving for a new Borderlands game to come out. And before I get into some of the things that Randy Pitchford has recently said about Borderlands 3 at places like Pax West and during this recent IGN interview that he did, I want to know how many of you that picked up Borderlands 2 at or near launch came across this video. Or if you didn't pick up the game at launch, where did you first get into Borderlands 2? And by the way, feel free to leave that in the comment section below. But enough of my reminiscing about Borderlands 2, let's talk Borderlands 3. Now, over the past couple of weeks, Randy Pitchford has been making a lot of comments about Borderlands 3. At PAX West on September 2nd, Randy Pitchford basically said, and I quote, "We have 300 people in our headquarters in Frisco, Texas. We've got another 70 or so in our studio in Quebec City and Canada, and in any given moment we work with a lot of outside help, contractors and folks that have a particular talent or a particular capability, and sometimes as many 50 to 100 people outside of the studio that are helping us on things at any given time. Sometimes even more. At this moment, at least 90% of our productive capability is working on the thing that I think most of you guys want us to be working on. But you know, Gearbox is publishing now, and the suits that publish have a saying, which is, a product does not exist until it's announced. So basically, what I would take this to mean is that the vast majority of Gearbox's resources are devoted to working on Borderlands 3 or the next Borderlands. And if you ask me, this was really good to hear, because at the time, Gearbox had strangely announced Project 1v1, and the vast majority of their more recent projects have involved their publishing wing. After all, Gearbox released Homeworld, they did a Duke Nukem 3D re-release, they did a re-release of Bulletstorm, and perhaps most recently, Gearbox helped publish a game called Fortnite, and will be involved with another game franchise called We Happy Few. And this behavior suggested to me that Gearbox was trying to perhaps part ways with 2K and focus on building their company around publishing. And if they aren't working with 2K, then there's a good chance that they might not have been making Borderlands anymore. So it is good to hear that Gearbox has 90% of its productive capability working on the thing, aka Borderlands, that we want them to be working on. However, Randy has also made a couple comments recently on why Borderlands 3's development has taken so long. And in an interview with IGN, Pitchford has been recorded as stating that, quote, "The easiest thing in the world would be for us to churn out a lot of pre-sequels, and we could make a lot of money." From this point, Randy went on to compare the weight between Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto 4 to the weight between Borderlands 2 and 3, in the sense that both games released spin-off titles in between their major releases. However, the spin-off titles like Vice City or San Andreas were based on the old engine from Grand Theft Auto 3 and were built for the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox at the time. However, as the new consoles at the time released, people's expectations for what Grand Theft Auto 4 would be increased, and thus, that's why the wait between GTA 3 and GTA 4 was so long. Now, if you ask me, this is also good to hear, simply for the fact that Borderlands 2 ran on Unreal Engine 3 and was designed with the PS3 and Xbox 360 in mind. And I think Randy is definitely right that many players today not only expect a new Borderlands game with new features, but a game that also takes advantage of Unreal Engine 4 and is designed with the newer PS4 and Xbox One, but also the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X in mind as well. On the other hand, Pitchford did say some things that had me a little worried in that IGN interview, such as, and I quote, I think we need to figure this out and do this right. So we're going to work on it, and when we think we've had it, we're not going to announce anything until we think we have something worthy of announcing, and we'll set expectations on that. However, speaking of expectations, Randy then goes on to say, the only expectation that should be set right now is, man, it would be nice if there was another game, and I hope Gearbox is working on it. While the 90% comment made me feel a little bit better about future Borderlands games, Randy's more recent comments from this IGN interview seem to indicate something entirely different. On the one hand, Randy is saying that 90% of the studio is working on the game we want them to be working on. However, then he's saying that the expectation should be that it would be nice if there was another Borderlands game, and hopefully Gearbox is working on it. Well, my question simply is, are you guys working on it or not? My only guess here is that Randy wants it to be a surprise in some way, and it might be that Gearbox is trying to emulate Bethesda's E3 2015 reveal for Fallout 4, and as far as the reveal for Fallout 4 goes, I will admit that at the time that occurred, that was huge news, especially since Bethesda was really tight-lipped on Fallout 4 since the release of New Vegas back in 2010. So it could just be that Randy is trying to surprise us, so when things are actually announced, people's minds are blown and there's a lot of hype. If you think about it, it could be a learning experience from Battleborn's announcement, which was announced in 2014, but didn't actually come out until 2016 due to delays. And I would say that on some level, the hype for Battleborn, or whatever hype Battleborn had, sort of died out due to those numerous delays. And if you think about it, what if Randy Pitchford announced Borderlands 3 today, and then it didn't come out until 2018? There's a good chance that the hype for the game might have died down by then. One last thing before we go here, but I think the biggest indicator at this point of when Borderlands 3 is going to be coming out is that Take-Two investor call, where they are mentioning that a highly anticipated game from one of 2K's biggest franchises is coming out for the 2019 fiscal year. And that fiscal year, I believe, is like April 2018 to March 2019. So I would say between the GDC tech demo for Borderlands 3, the fact that Randy is saying that like 90% of the company is working on the game, and the fact that 2K is saying that a new highly anticipated game from one of their biggest franchises is coming out in the 2019 fiscal year, you know, it's got to be Borderlands. I mean, I guess it could be NBA 2K20, but that just seems like it's given anyway. But alright guys, I think that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like and let me know what you think about either Borderlands 2's 5-year anniversary or some of Randy's more recent comments about Borderlands. Feel free to leave that in the comments section below. Otherwise, click the bell to join the notification squad, and as always, take care, and I'll see y'all next time.